Chapter 8. Mrs. Wira was back. "I'll be moving in this afternoon, Pravana," she said. "You can help me." Pravana wanted to get back to her blanket, but helping Mrs. Wira would be another change in routine, so that was fine with her. Besides, as long as Mrs. Wira was around, Mother seemed like her old self. "Mrs. Wira and I are going to work together," Mother announced. "We're going to start a magazine. So we'll all have our jobs to do. Naria will look after the little ones. Your mother and I will work on our project, and you will go out to work," Mrs. Weaver declared, as though she were assigning positions on the hockey field. "We're all pulling together." Pravana showed them the money she'd earned. "Oh, wonderful," Mother said. "I knew you could do it." "Father would have made much more," Naria said, then bit her lip as if she were attempting to bite back her words. Pravana was in too good of a mood to be bothered. After tea and naan for lunch, Pravana headed out with Mrs. Weera to get her belongings. Mrs. Weera wore the burqa, of course, but she had such a distinctive way of walking that Pravana was sure she could pick her out of a whole marketplace of women wearing burqas. She walked as though she were rounding up children who were dawdling after class. She walked swiftly, head and shoulders back, just to be safe, though. Parvana stayed close to her. "The Taliban don't usually bother women out alone with small children," Mrs. Rewa was saying, "although you can't be certain of that. Fortunately, I can probably outrun any of these soldiers, outfight them too if they tangle with me. I've handled many a teenage boy in my teaching years. There wasn't one I couldn't reduce to tears with a good lecture." "I saw a Talib cry this morning," Pravana said. But her words were lost in the whoosh of air as they moved quickly through the streets. Mrs. Weira had been living with her grandchild in a room even smaller than Pravana's. It was in the basement of a ruined building. "We are the last of the Weiras," she said. "The bombs took some, the war took others, and pneumonia took the rest." Pravana didn't know what to say. Mrs. Weira did not sound as though she was looking for sympathy. "We have the loan of a Karachi for the afternoon," Mrs. Weira said. "The owner needs it back this evening to go to work. But we'll manage it all splendidly in one trip, won't we?" Mrs. Weira had lost a lot of things, too, in bombing raids. What the bombs didn't get, the bandits did. Makes it easier to move, though, doesn't it? Pravana loaded a few quilts and cooking things onto the Karachi. Mrs. Weira had everything packed and ready. "Here's something they didn't get." She took a medal on the bright ribbon out of a box. "I won this in an athletics competition. It means I was the fastest woman runner in all of Afghanistan." The sun caught the gleaming gold on the medal. "I have other medals too," Mrs. Weira said. "Some have been lost, but some I still have." She sighed a little, then caught herself. "Enough recess. Back to work." By the end of the afternoon, Mrs. Weira had been moved in, and the Karachi had been returned. Parvana was too wound up from the day's activities to sit still. "I'll get some water," she offered. "You? Offering to do something?" Naria asked. "Are you feeling well?" Parvana ignored her. "Mother, can I take Miriam to the tap with me?" "Yes, yes, yes!" Miriam jumped up and down. "I want to go with Parvana." Mother hesitated. "Let her go," Mrs. Weira advised. "Parvana's a boy now. Miriam will be safe." Mother relented, but first she spoke to Miriam. "What do you call Parvana when you're outside?" "Kashim." "Good. And who is Kashim?" "My cousin." "Very good. Remember that, and do what Parvana says. Stay right with her. Do you promise?" Miriam promised. She ran to put on her sandals. "They're too tight," she started to cry. "She hasn't been outside in over a year," Mother explained to Miss Weira. "Of course her feet have grown." "Bring them to me and dry your tears," Mrs. Weira told Miriam. The sandals were plastic, all in one piece. "These will do for Ali soon, so I won't cut them. For today, we'll wrap your feet in cloth. Pravana will buy you proper sandals tomorrow. She should be out in the sunshine every day, she said to Mother. But never mind. Now that I'm here, we'll soon have this family whipped into shape. She tied several layers of cloth around the child's feet. The skin will be tender if she hasn't been outside in such a long time, she told Pravana. Mind how you go. I'm not sure about this, Mother began, but Pravana and her sister hurried out before she could stop them. Fetching water took a very long time. Miriam had seen nothing but the four walls of the room for almost a year and a half. Everything outside the door was new to her. Her muscles were not used to the most basic exercise. Pravana had to help her up and down the steps as carefully as she had to help father. This is the tap, she said to her sister as soon as they arrived. Pravana had walked a little ahead to smooth a pathway free of stones. She turned on the tap so that the water gushed out. Miriam laughed. She stuck a hand in the flow, then snatched it back as the cool water touched her skin. She looked at Pravana, eyes wide open. Pravana helped her to do it again. This time, she let the water flow over her hand. Don't swallow any, Pravana warned, then showed her how to splash her face with the water. Miriam copied her, getting more water on her clothes than on her face, but at least she had a good time. One trip was enough for Miriam that first time. The next day, Pravana took Miriam's sandals to the market and used them as a guide to get a bigger pair. She found some used ones that a man was selling along the street. Every day after that, Miriam went to the tap with Pravana, and bit by bit, she started to get stronger. The days began to fall into a pattern. Pravana went out to the market early every morning, returned home for lunch, then went back out to the market in the afternoon. I could stay out there if there was a latrin I could use. In the market, she said. I would want you to come home midday anyway, Mother said. I want to know you are all right. One day, after she had been working for a week, Pravana had an idea. Mother, I'm seen as a boy, right? That's the idea, Mother said. Then I could be your escort, Pravana said. I could be Noria's escort too, and you could both get outside sometimes. Pravana was excited about this. If Noria got some exercise, maybe she wouldn't be so grumpy. Of course, she wouldn't get much fresh air under the burqa, but at least it would be a change. Excellent idea, Mrs. Weira said. I don't want you as my escort, Noria said. But Mother stopped her from saying any more. Noria, Ali should go outside. Pravana is able to manage fine with Miriam, but Ali squirms so much. You will have to hold on to him. You should get out sometimes too, Fatana, Mrs. Weira said to Mother. Mother didn't answer. For Ali's sake, Noria went along with the idea. Every day after lunch, Pravana, Noria, Ali, and Miriam went outside for an hour. Ali had been only a few months old when the Taliban came. All he really knew was the little room they had been shut up in for the last year and a half. Noria had not been outside either in all that time. They would walk around the neighborhood until their legs got tired, then they would sit in the sunshine. When there was no one around, Pravana would keep watch, and Noria would flip up her burqa to let the sun pour down on her face. Oh, I'd forgotten how good this feels, she said. When there was no lineup at the water tap, Noria would wash the little ones right there and save Pravana having to carry that water. Sometimes Mrs. Rio was with them, with her grandchild, and all three children were washed at the same time. Business had good days and bad days. Sometimes Pravana would sit for hours without a customer. She made less money than her father had, but the family was eating, even though most days they ate just naan and tea. The children seemed livelier than they had in a long time. The daily sun and fresh air were doing them a lot of good, although Noria said they were harder to look after now in the room. They had more energy and always wanted to go outside, which they couldn't do when Pravana was out at work. At the end of each day, Pravana handed over all the money she'd made. Sometimes Mother asked her to buy naan or something else on the way home. Sometimes, the times Pravana liked best, Mother would come with her to the market to shop for the family. Mrs. Weaver's arguments had finally worn her down. Pravana liked having her mother all to herself, even though they didn't talk about anything other than how much cooking oil to buy or whether they could afford soap that week. Pravana loved being in the market. She loved watching people move along the streets, loved hearing snatches of conversation that reached her ears, loved reading the letters people brought her. She still missed her father, but as the weeks went by, she began to get used to him being gone. It helped that she was busy now. The family didn't talk about him, but she heard Mother and Naria crying sometimes. Once, Miriam had a nightmare and woke up calling for Father. It took Mother a long time to get her back to sleep. Then, one afternoon, Pravana saw her father in the market. He was walking away from her, but Pravana was sure it was him. "Father!" she called out, springing off her blanket and rushing after him. "Father, I'm here!" She ran into the crowd, pushing people out of her way until she finally reached her father and threw her arms around him. "Father, you're safe. They let you out of prison." "Who are you, boy?" Pravana looked up into a strange face. She backed away. I thought you were my father," she said, tears falling down her face. The man put his hand on her shoulder. "You seem like a fine boy. I am sorry. I am not your father." He paused, then said in a lower voice, "Your father is in prison?" Pravana nodded. "People are released from prison sometimes. Don't give up hope." The man went on his way into the market, and Pravana went back to her blanket. One afternoon, Pravana was about to shake out her blanket before going home when she noticed a spot of color on the gray wool. She bent down to pick it up. It was a small square of embroidered cloth, no more than 2 inches long and an inch wide. Pravana had never seen it before. As she wondered where it had come from, her eyes went up to the blacked out window where she thought she had seen a flicker of movement a few weeks before. There was no movement now. The wind must have carried a little piece of embroidery to her blanket, although it hadn't been a very windy day. She couldn't blame the wind a few days later, though, when she found a beaded bracelet on her blanket after work. She looked up at the window. It was open. It swung out over the wall of the house. Pravana walked closer to get a better look. In the narrow, open space, Pravana saw a woman's face. The woman gave Pravana a quick smile, then pulled the window shut. A few days later, Pravana was sitting, watching the tea boys run back and forth between the customers and the tea shops. One of the boys almost collided with a donkey. Pravana was laughing and looking the other way when a tea boy tripped on something near her and spilled a tray of empty teacups all over her blanket. The boy sprawled in the dust in front of Pravana. She helped him gather the cups that had rolled away. She handed him the tray and saw his face for the first time. She let out a gasp and slapped a hand across her mouth. The tea boy was a girl from her class.